hear it, but if you don't, then you don't.
All right, I guess we can get a little more personal.
We can.
Did you sleep good last night?
For the first time this week, I slept great last night.
Awesome.
Yeah, my eyes are still red just because I wear contacts. They're kind of old. But yeah, I slept well. Hey, I think we might actually be live right now, Brett.
Oh,
all right, welcome to our Friday. Yeah, act normal, as if you don't, or as if you ever do. Welcome everybody to our Friday noon Pacific time, because that's where we're based here. Live Q&A at the Edge offices. Forgive us, we're trying a bit of a new rig. We've got a different mic, so if you can hear people typing in the background, our office is the studio. We don't have any fancy little studio and whatnot. So if you can hear some background noise, forgive us. But today we're going to cover, a few of the common beginner questions that come our way. So apologize if it's something we've touched on in the past. But there's always new users into crypto.
And,
we want to help them out.
And a lot of the beginner questions are the best questions because they're simple and to the point, and we're able to elaborate. And sometimes you learn more even when you dive even deeper into beginner type questions.
And sometimes the answer changes because crypto changes. Yeah. Exactly. When someone said, "Hey, what's the mining fee of a transaction?" 5 years ago, it's 0.0001 Bitcoin. Done. Mm-hmm. That's all you had to say, right? It was less than a penny. And now that changes, and that's the same thing for Ethereum and whatnot. So we'll dive into what was first common beginner question that we typically got in here.
A typical user question is, and I see it on a lot of forums, what is the difference between a node and a miner? And I think most people, they think of node as a full node that is validating all transactions, and a miner is creating new units of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I remember and a lot of people get confused about it because they read in the white paper, there's a lot of conflation of terms, like a node might be a miner could be a node. Can you talk about how that has developed over time?
Yeah, so starting off
what do we come to understand it to be now?
So in the beginning of original Bitcoin, when you downloaded pretty much the only software that would be available to run or do anything in Bitcoin, it was monolithic. It was everything in one giant package of software to do.
What you have?
You mined automatically. As soon as you ran the code, it started mining Bitcoin. Number two, it was a full node. So it actually did validate all the transactions. It propagated transactions. And then it was also the wallet. It created public and private keys, public address. Actually, and originally there were no public addresses. There were just public keys, actually. It could create, sign, and send transactions to other people that were running these full nodes.
Yeah, an address was actually an improvement on the user experience.
An address was something that is layered on top of a public key.
So when people were running Bitcoin in 2009, 2010, they were a wallet operator, full node, and a miner, proof of work miner, all at once.
All at once, exactly. And as we obviously have seen, that has started to fragment or become more modular, where you're not necessarily running the entire stack of Bitcoin by just launching the only piece of software available. We started to see people that were miners that were actually not full nodes.
So specialization,
which
is pretty standard in the history of technology and economics.
Yeah, you watch football. I hear you talk about football all the time. Football is like the classic sport of specialization. You've got the tiniest guys doing nothing but kicking a ball every half an hour, and then you got the gigantic linemen that almost never touch a football. They can barely even hold it and run down the field. Specialization. So that's what we're seeing and what we've seen in Bitcoin and a lot of technology. So I think the first advent of specialization and modularization was when you had a node that was just a full node and it didn't mine.
So we've talked a lot about wallets, and we know a lot about wallets. And we actually connect our users to nodes. What do full nodes do now that they're kind of separated from? They're not mining. And they're not necessarily a wallet. Correct. What is a node doing?
So they're validating the blocks that the miners generate and validating transactions and propagating the transactions. So they can take an incoming transaction that is not confirmed yet necessarily, but still verify that transaction hasn't attempted any double spend attempts. And then either choose to propagate it to other nodes on the network or choose to just throw it out and say, nope, I'm not going to listen to you. You're a double spend. Clearly, in block 500 blocks ago, that money was already spent.
So nodes can know that something is a double spend because they can look at the history, the full history of Bitcoin, and be like, hey, you already spent these units. You can't do it again.
Exactly. So they can do full history, holding of the entire blockchain, or what are called pruned blockchains, where they hold only the list of funds that haven't been spent yet. So that's all you need to know whether or not a transaction is valid is it spending funds that are in the pool of unspent money? Otherwise, it's clearly spending invalid funds. So node operators don't receive any mining reward. You still have to incur the cost of running a node, which is connectivity of the network, the bandwidth, some storage requirements, processing requirements, processing the transactions, like validating them, making sure that the signatures are correct. That does incur some amount of computation costs, and that you still do incur as a node operator. The benefit of running a node is that you effectively, on your own machine, are validating which transactions are and which blocks are truly adhering to the consensus network, saying that this block actually has mining power behind it, the transactions that are in it have not made any double spends, and you're not effectively trusting other nodes on the network to do that for you.
So we've covered that nodes are basically checkers, like they check everyone's work, make sure everyone's doing the right thing. What's the criteria, kind of like what's the checklist that they're validating? Right, there's a couple things that they're looking for that are like, hey, this works out. What are those
Probably
things?
The most important thing that they're doing, and I think this is where a lot of the people that say, run your own node, you're not secure unless you run your own node, people that say that are most concerned about the fact that miners are publishing correct blocks. Because as a node operator, you're not creating blocks. You're not the one that's actually creating and putting mining power into the validation of transactions into a block. Mm-hmm. But as a node operator, you're validating that the blocks themselves are correct.
Gotcha.
Right? They have the right amount of difficulty, they have the right amount of hashing power, and that the transactions in them are valid. So there's this checks and balances between node operators and effectively the miners. Right? And the node operators being kind of the business units, and to some degree on currencies like Bitcoin, the kind of individuals, since it is at this point able to be run by, to some degree, I'd say, well-to-do individuals, cost-wise. $100 a month, $200 a month can run a node in Bitcoin. Whereas in other currencies, you'd look for a higher expense and more business-like units to be running full nodes.
And we've talked about it before at the office. Like, what's the cost of keeping that barrier to entry low?
Well, this is the entire scaling debate, which is an entire rabbit hole to begin with. But the cost to keep it low is to make sure that the storage requirements, the bandwidth requirements, and the computation requirements, like your CPU, your Intel x86, Core i, whatever, is as small of a CPU as possible that can still validate the transactions and blocks. So
with that extra checkers, or these other entities that are validating, there are some trade-offs that you make to be able to allow a large, I guess, pool of hardware that wouldn't be able to check something that would require more work. Right.
Absolutely. So as networks generally scale and bandwidth scales and whatnot, you'll generally need higher power hardware, not necessarily more expensive hardware, but just higher power hardware. Obviously, as we know, computers do get faster over time. Yeah. And so what costs $5 in computation yesterday could cost $4 today. Yeah. And then that's the big trade-off. And this is, I think, where the battle starts to ensue. Is like, there shouldn't be a purist of make it as absolutely cheap as possible. There's no such thing as,
there's no such free.
There's no such thing as free, and it's not. And there's no such thing as, fully decentralized. Everyone's running a node. Yet there's also, no such thing as there's only one entity that fully controls everything, and you got to fall somewhere in between. What's good enough?
Yeah, I like to think, or you want to be able to reap the benefits of scale, but also not let scale get out of hand.
Yeah, not let it get out of hand.
Now you have a central entity.
Exactly.
So balancing that, because there are benefits that we can reap from scale, efficiency gains, professionalization, yada, yada, yada. But we also, as Bitcoiners or people in crypto, we're definitely cognizant of some type of central entity. And I think this also segues into a normal beginner question, which is fees. Right? Which we get
this question a lot.
Yeah, nothing's free. Even when, say, things were very cheap on the Bitcoin network 5 years ago, there was still a cost for the use. So like the general question is, why do fees float like they do? When I use Visa or some other payment method, it's pretty standard, fixed. Like it's either free or I'm paying in some other way.
Ironically, Visa and MasterCard are not fixed fees. They're actually quite variable.
They're variable rate.
And the only difference is you don't see it because you're the consumer. To the merchant, they're actually very variable. So before I got into crypto, I worked at a lot of small businesses, and I'd get the sheet
I did not know
of
that.
all the transactions that have occurred through our point of sale and the fees involved. And I'd look at them and go, what the hell, what formula are they using to calculate these fees? And what you don't see going on behind the covers is how many middlemen it takes to process that transaction and how many are involved.
Mm-hmm.
And the fees are variable depending on the amount of middlemen, which could depend on what kind of a card the user is using.
Yep.
So some cards are more directly tied to you and some are more distant. Is it an international card? If it's an international card, that actually affects the merchant. A lot of people might have an international card that doesn't charge them additional fees, like currency conversion, but the merchant then takes it. Do you have a rewards card, one that gives you points? That'll actually impart more fees to the merchant as well. Do you have a business card with rewards points? Now the merchant's really screwed. You just don't see that because you're the consumer. But fees are actually somewhat variable. Now, they're not that variable to the same degree that they are in Bitcoin, right? But realize that the world is more variable in fees than you realize.
And Bitcoin is just honest about it. It's in your face about it. A lot of the other costs are kind of hidden from the user experience. Like, you're paying for it, you just don't know how.
It's a little bit more in your face, and I think the challenge, the reason why we get this question from users all the time, is that there is no one answer to what are the fees.
It's true.
Right. Whereas in Visa, there kind of is an answer. Like, you're going to get charged.
Well, ours is a market. They're setting.
It's an open market.
They're in a market, but they're also setting prices within their payment system.
Yeah, and it's a very competitive and liquid market of specifically Visa and MasterCard to be able to say who are the middlemen and how can we minimize the fees of those middlemen. With Bitcoin, it is a market of people trying to get a transaction or data into a block, and there's only so much space. This is true of all blockchains. There's only so much space. It costs money to get the transactions into the block, and if someone else is willing to pay more, they outbid you, they get in. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much that simple. You pay more, you outbid someone else, you get in. If there's more space, then you don't have to pay as much because there's fewer people trying to get in.
Or you'd have to, I guess, stretch the time you're willing to wait.
Yeah, just imagine if there was a freeway that just had, freeways have a limited amount of bandwidth. And if you want to pay, say there was a carpool lane where you could just simply pay extra. What if every single lane had a cost? And the higher you pay, the faster of a lane you get to be in. It's simple as that. But what you pay doesn't necessarily get you in the faster lane. It's what you pay relative to someone else. Mm-hmm. Will determine whether or not you get into the faster, slower, or you just don't even get in. Like, you just end up sitting in the freeway entrance, asking to get in and not actually getting in.
And that's why some people might move to other chains, because there's
other
some chains, they might have the same space, but not as many people are using, or they even have a lot more space for transactions to come through,
empty
and not a lot of people. So
deserted freeways, drive as fast as you want.
And there's definitely a large contingent of people that have moved out of the BTC main chain into other chains for their use case of fast, cheap, non-crowded payment systems.
Yeah, and I think that
or
there
at least
actually
for low
could be
value.
a future. Yeah, exactly, for low value, and there is the strong potential of a future where this is how we scale crypto, is because we have low friction to convert between cryptocurrencies.
It looks like we have
Then we effectively can do payments via other currencies and convert in and out of the ones that we choose to store.
Yeah, like, we are a technology that kind of, I think, allows crypto to scale as it is, because there's like infinite block space within our application, right? They're not all chains
block
are,
space if you add all.
If you add all, that's what I'm.
Blocks together.
You
That's
think
like
of it as
infinite
one
sharding.
entity.
In a way, like infinite sharding.
Yes.
But the more you shard, the less convenient it becomes.
And then you have even greater currency risks once you go down the cap
Volatility.
table compared to BTC.
Right, you end up having higher
But if you're
volatility.
just if someone's looking for literally one, I guess, myopic part of money, which is like cheap, fast payments,
Right.
and you don't really care about the risk that much on there, and you can easily get back into some other currency, then you could easily use, Litecoin or Doge or Bitcoin Cash or Ethereum for quick, easy payments.
Right, exactly. You do have to effectively hold those other currencies for some period of time, because obviously if you're converting to Doge to make a payment, you're converting from Bitcoin on every transaction, then you might as well just be transacting from Bitcoin. So you would want to be converting some block of funds into spending funds, but then at that time incurring the volatility risk of the payment currency versus the holding currency. So to some degree, I think, if you took the entire market cap of cryptocurrency and you consolidated it into a handful of holding currencies and utility currencies, they would, and then you took over the world with that. you took over the world with a handful, even a dozen of these, which is like way more than a handful, that the market cap spread across a dozen of the top cryptocurrencies would make for 10, 12 very stable currencies, which could have both the payment mechanisms covered and the kind of store of value covered across all of them. So that hopefully is what will be a world that we move towards, where we can just kind of take over the fiats and achieve all of the functionality that the fiats have today, with less of the friction.
Well, I think an analogy can be made what's happening in media, where a lot of people are getting their political news now from the internet.
Oh yeah.
Right, and they're looking to. I feel a new debate format coming on with. You can just stretch out. You can have a 3-hour debate or actual discussion between candidates because of the new technology, and a lot of them are kind of folding into the internet, like CNN. They all have stuff on YouTube and things like that.
Yep, they're on the new digital format, just like money's moving on to the new digital format.
Same thing's happening in money.
Yep. Hopefully that answers everyone's questions on generally mining versus nodes. Full monolithic Bitcoin to where we are today, with the wallets being separated from nodes, being separated from miners, and how nodes are affected by scalability and how fees are affected by that. Right? Cool.
It's all connected. So we got another kind of a recent story that came up that brought up another big topic that has been talked about a lot in Bitcoin. Is very important to a lot of people and groups that have been developing Bitcoin for a while, and they know it's an issue. And the issue is fungibility of the units and like identity in general, linking people to certain addresses and being able to publicly see that, right? So there's some benefits to being able to see all the addresses and transactions like that, but there are ways that governments can link activity and addresses to certain people. And then what happened the other day was the U.S. Treasury basically listed a bunch of addresses, BTC and so Bitcoin and Litecoin addresses, that some apparently Chinese, they describe them as drug kingpins. So they were somehow getting fentanyl and other opioids into the United States, which is a huge health problem in the United States and now a political problem because of that. And the U.S. Treasury is now kind of going after that trade, and some of those people in that trade have been using Bitcoin and Litecoin. And
not surprising.
Now, a lot of people are okay, I'm personally, I have no affinity to those people, but it definitely affects financial privacy, right? And the potential usefulness and, I guess, freedom enhancing nature of Bitcoin, where you could, you not only, if you can do this to bad people, you can do it to good people as well. That might. And
the definition of bad and good is very well.
It's usually it's usually defined by what the authorities say.
Correct.
Right. And
authorities in one jurisdiction are different, have a different opinion than authorities in another jurisdiction. But with respect to these drug kingpins and specifically Bitcoin addresses. Now, granted, I think it's generally kind of silly to go and publish a list of sanctioned addresses because it's so trivial to get the money out of that address and into another one and into another one. However, I do think that Bitcoin has a general privacy issue that unfortunately there doesn't seem to be a lot of effort to fix. Scalability is one that's being worked on with things like the Light Network, but I don't think that privacy as a whole has been urgent enough in the camp and developers of Bitcoin, which is why I think a rise of other currencies that focus on privacy has occurred. With obviously a lot of people have heard of Monero, Zcash.
Could we back up and define fungibility for people that aren't familiar with the word and the term, like kind of what it means to you and what it means in the case of Bitcoin?
For sure. Fungibility is the ability to simply have a unit of a currency be equal to another unit. So when
we swap, you have a US dollar and I have a US dollar.
I give that to you. When we swap,
we have no feeling of difference there, and we feel like it is each unit is equivalent. And I can do the same with.
Or if you have 5 units of one US dollar, I won't prefer one versus another. Like I'm not gonna say, that US dollar to me it's worth 90 cents versus this other US dollar it's worth $1.10. Now, granted, there is no such thing as 100% fungibility.
Yeah.
There's always
like 100% security.
Anything. There's no 100% security. There's no 100% decentralization. There's no 100% fungibility. Let's get pretty close to it. So at least within paper money, you're pretty close to that, unless you're giving me something that's like ratted, torn up. If you put 5 bills in front of me and 4 are ratted and torn up, one's clean, new, to me they'll probably worth a little bit more. But for the most part, they're fungible. And this is what we want in cryptocurrencies, where if I can see, if you're sending me Bitcoin and I know I can see the history of that coin, not necessarily who is associated to it, but which addresses it's traveled from. And two, if I prefer one versus another, then that is decreasing the fungibility of Bitcoin.
Gotcha. I think of fungibility as extremely important for money because a lot of our social lives are based on like reputation, which I think is important. People want to know who you are and what your history is and stuff like that. But reputation can also be distorted or abused, right?
Yes.
And money is kind of that outlet for like, no matter how maybe people have portrayed you or things that you've done in the past, you're still able to redeem yourself in kind of a marketplace. That's what I think of it as important. Cause
that's important, and that's for yourself, what you do, how you act, and how you interact with people. The problem with money that's not fungible is the fact that you now carry the reputation of someone that gave you that money.
Like if I got, somehow some of my units were
carried over from
there, I could be
kingpins.
Targeted even though I have nothing, I don't know them, I don't support them.
Correct, exactly. And they might be a degree separated away from you. They paid someone who then gave you some money. And then now you lose out on the value of that money by virtue of simply accepting it. And you think that it's fungible, but effectively it's broken that fungibility. So that's why it's important, is that way it allows us to retain our own validity in the marketplace and not carry over who we've transacted with in that validity. And so this is a concern in cryptocurrency. When an address is just simply a random number, you can create multiple different addresses and money can be very easily tumbled. And so while I think the US government sanctioning these addresses is an inconvenience, it's bad news, it by no way, shape, and form will stop these drug kingpins. In no way, shape, and form. It is trivial for them to go, oh, those addresses? Great, I'm going to move them out of, if I have money in that one address and I'm one of these drug kingpins, I move it out into 10 other addresses. And then from there into 10 other addresses, and into 10 other addresses. And at some point, do you basically take all the money that's into any of those addresses and say that that's all invalid?
Well, why not just take all those units and convert it to Monero if you can?
That, but just showing that even within the Bitcoin blockchain, it's incredibly hard for a government to say.
You're saying even if they left it on the blockchain, it would be hard because they just keep dispersing it, and it would be impossible to track at some point.
At some point, it starts mixing in with funds that never touch that address.
Yeah.
And you've got 21 million coins that will ever exist. If you know anything about exponents, as you start to take one address, send that to 5 addresses, and each one of those addresses you send to 5, and each one of those addresses you send to 5. That number of addresses starts exploding, and at some point you'll encompass a vast majority of the money that even exists in Bitcoin. And now what are you sanctioning? So this to me creates a bigger inconvenience to regular users who might be 1 address away from here, 2 addresses away, and don't know that their tooling on their wallet isn't tumbling. It basically affects the people that don't tumble money.
I mean, that might be the point. That might be the point of the action. Force them into that situation.
But it's affecting the people who are innocent.
Speculating.
This is the kind of news that affects the people that aren't actually guilty of whatever these drug kingpins out of China are doing, but it doesn't at all affect the drug kingpins themselves.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because if they're going through this much trouble to do and making a lot of money through these dark markets and selling drugs and importing them from China into the US, this is a trivial amount of extra effort for them to tumble the money and wipe it clean of these sanctioned addresses.
This is all about the past. So these are addresses that they have that they know about that have transactions on them. They could go to other chains that are more privacy focused now that they know. Right. Yeah. It's kind of a never-ending rabbit chase for them.
Yeah, they'd be completely chasing the money until they realize that the money is dispersed into everyone else's money, into everyone else's funds.
What they need to do is focus on meat space, right?
Physical, not digital space. Meat space is very, as if you don't understand meat space, it's the physical realm. It's real people. It's how we interact with each other, not the digital realm. The digital realm is far more convenient
Yes.
The same way that we live in the digital
true.
realm, that's how we order. We use Amazon versus walking into the mall. It's far more convenient for law enforcement to go after people in the digital realm because they can survey a lot of the world all at once. They can survey a lot of emails all at once. They can look at records and churn through and use AI to churn through records all at once. And it's very 1940s, investigator dragnet style to go and investigate through meat space.
Doing the hard work
The hard
to
work.
actually shut down these drug kingpins that are
Exactly.
pumping in. And BTC is just one of the tools that they use.
Yep.
One of many.
Exactly. So this, it kind of hit as big news, like, oh my God, they're actually blacklisting certain addresses, and it's inconvenient, but yet it's just such a small number of addresses. It's like 10 Bitcoin addresses and 1 Litecoin address. Those are probably no longer being used by those entities as we speak, and they've moved the money out and tumbled them into hundreds of other addresses. And so very irrelevant from the viewpoint of accomplishing the actual goal of enforcing the law, but if anything, just making media headlines is probably the most that this thing has done. And potentially making it inconvenient for end users, such as if by some chance, somehow, some way, an end user was maybe 2 hops from one of these addresses into their own, and then their money gets quote unquote sanctioned, which would be very unfortunate. And the user would have no way of knowing that actually happened. I think that's the ramification of these types of actions, is that you just hurt the end user.
The collateral damage.
Just the collateral damage is huge, yeah.
You think you're going after, I guess, the nefarious actors, and by doing so in the manner that they're doing it, there's collateral damage for people that had nothing to do with it.
And my guess is they're just simply going to drop this and not care.
So what needs to happen for Bitcoin to become more fungible or get closer to that limit of
Definitely
fungibility?
the technology that the groups in Monero and Zcash are implementing would make this nearly irrelevant.
And what are the specific technologies that
It's
or
making
you're
so
saying
that-
they're in there right now, or
Yeah, the
they're
privacy
developing?
coins.
Okay.
Well, it's always actively being developed. So
Okay.
Monero has a high level of Monero and Zcash. At least Zcash being used in its private mode has a high level of privacy in and of itself, and then they improve on that over time. Same thing as Monero.
So and how would that be implemented would that be a hard fork, or could it be implemented as a soft fork?
Some of the technologies can be implemented just at the wallet level. So tumbling, for example, it's not as good of privacy as the zero knowledge proofs or bullet proofs that Monero uses. Tumbling in and of itself is a privacy technique, although it's costly in Bitcoin, because every time you send out to some addresses that cost money, you send out to more and you tumble and tumble. It costs money, more and more money, which inhibits the kind of casual commercial user, but doesn't inhibit a drug kingpin, right? They're probably pushing tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars, so it doesn't really affect them. That's one thing that can be incorporated, and some wallets do this already, but they're very inconvenient to use. When it's baked into the currency, that's when I think it becomes very valuable, such as the way it's baked into Monero and into Zcash. As well, making it such that an address, right now in Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, if there is an address that you are aware of, you can see the amount of money that's in that address. You can see all the incoming transactions and the outgoing transactions. That's not true in Zcash shielded addresses or in Monero addresses. Like, just by having the address, you don't in and of itself know what money or transactions have gone into or out of that address. That's a huge, huge privacy benefit.
Now, would that be on by default in Bitcoin, or would you think would be a toggle feature? Because I do think a lot of people do like, from a transparency, maybe you're running a certain organization, having addresses that you'd be like, hey, I'm running this charity, these are the inputs of money, and these were the outputs went, right? And a lot of charitable organizations, it's like you send money, it's a black box.
I've been of the opinion that transparency using the blockchain is kind of pointless.
Okay.
Because how am I supposed to be? Say I'm someone that donates to a charity. Just because I donated to a certain address doesn't mean I have any clue what the hell you did with that money. You got to give me a full audited accounting report.
No, I think it's a level above the system we have now. Not that it's going to prove
it's a level
that
above, but it's such
still,
a
you're saying it's still not good enough.
It's so not good enough
Okay.
that I would rather that charity use a private currency and then just give me audited reports.
It's kind of like
right, because a blockchain trail doesn't tell me what you did with that money, and how much the CEO earned and how much you spent on parties.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't tell you any of that, and so it doesn't give me enough transparency to care. I would sooner and prefer the world to adopt a private currency like a Zcash Monero, or to have that technology put into Bitcoin. I think going forward that would be a generally a bigger positive than the whole positive of transparency. Like,
for
I don't think-
transparency's sake.
For transparency's
and
sake.
it's only Bitcoin is only transparent about itself,
Yeah.
right? And if you're trying to make a organization more transparent, it's still not enough
It's
to
not
have
enough.
that extra cryptographic.
Yeah.
It might be. I get what you're saying. It
Because
might be a little
organization
bit
can be
better.
kind of like these Chinese drug cartels. 'Cause
Yeah.
they could have effectively be tumbling the money
Yeah.
themselves. So it doesn't give you that enough. You just need to actually see like spreadsheets and like the QuickBooks and Quicken files to know what are they doing with the money.
Well, and I guess if we're a charity and needs based, I'd say the ultimate is like you have to go there wherever
go
they're
there.
doing the good, so to
Yeah.
speak. You
Or
have to
just
go
see the
there and
results.
see it with your eyes.
Or you just
know?
see the results, really, and that's all you care about.
Use your perception.
It-
Yeah, because
what-
Bitcoin only talks about itself. So you're right.
Like
It's
you're sending money to a charity and you want them to achieve results. In a way, you don't care as much what the internal workings of it are, right? That's not worth your time. You care about the results that they achieve, and hopefully they achieve that. So, kind of,
Wrap
summarize,
this
wrap it up. Yeah, I fundamentally believe that a long-standing, valuable crypto that we'll end up using for the next several decades does need to have privacy akin to what we see in the Monero and Zcashes of the world,
'Cause-
Zcoins, whatnot.
if you have a money that isn't fungible, it basically becomes an identity system, which identity systems are needed,
But they should be separate from the money.
but they're limited. Just like money is needed, but it's limited, right? Reputation, identity is still very important, but those things can be distorted for their own, and that's why you need kind of this anonymous.
You want your own identity not
layer.
to carry over someone else's. That's really, I think, the important aspect of fungibility is that I want my identity to
Well,
be because of
yeah.
me, not because of someone else that I may have interacted with.
Okay, and
Cool.
then
All right, we're about out of time.
We should go over
30 minutes?
events that are coming up.
Yes,
Where
how
we're
can you
gonna be at?
catch our team over at Edge? What places we're going to be? What events we're going to be taking
We're all
part
over
of?
the place.
We are, actually. So we are, first of all, I will actually be this Saturday in Riverside at the Blockchain Empire meetup. So
Young Dumb Crypto.
Young Dumb Crypto.
That's a good YouTube
Shout out, good YouTube
channel.
channel. So go check out Young Dumb Crypto. I'll
Great
be over
guys.
there on Saturday evening, 5 p.m. Just look it up, Blockchain Empire in Riverside, California.
Oh, so
Be there
Inland
for the
Empire
evening.
kind of vibes.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Inland Empire. For the people that don't want to trek all the way out to the beach and the coast where most of us are, we'll show them some love. As well, on Thursday, the 29th, Jessica on our team, our controller, will be over at BitActive.
Jay Payne?
Yep, exactly. BitActive, another meetup over in Long Beach. So check out that event as well. And the next week, a great event hosted by Michael Perklin of Shapeshift and Andreas Antonopoulos is the Blockchain Training Conference in Denver.
That's going to be a phenomenal event.
Great looking event, great lineup, great classes, really, really aimed at teaching people about crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin.
I'd say it'd be better if you guys are looking into going to conferences. This is probably the best one that I've seen in terms of bang for your buck if you're really trying to learn about it. Not necessarily look for investment opportunities, but learn about the infrastructure.
Yep.
Paul will be
Exactly.
one of the many
Yep.
teachers that are there.
I'll be there teaching about mining, the basics of mining, what mining is, what's its purpose on the network, and the different kinds of mining. I'll be teaching a course on that. I'll also be teaching a course on forks. So what exactly is a fork, soft fork, hard fork, and its implications, and also what you should do in case some of the money that you have is about to fork. And then also giving a little workshop on Edge and how people can use it to acquire and send crypto. So that's in Denver, Wednesday, next week, 28th to the 30th. And then as well, after that, in the middle of September, I'll be at Tel Aviv Blockchain Week, going from the 9th to about the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a DeFi and dApps Day, and I'll be speaking there on September 10th over in Tel Aviv. So definitely catch us if you want to catch us in the meat space, not just in the digital realm or on the YouTubes and the Twitters of the world.
We're real.
We're real. We got real flesh. Come say hi, and we'll catch you guys over there. And until next Friday, not your keys?
Oh, not your crypto. Are you going rock climbing this weekend?
Possibly.
Okay, let me know.
Possibly. Well, maybe before I go to the Empire.
Okay,
Inland Empire.
I'm interested.
All right, cool.
All right, guys.
Maybe we'll do a climbing meetup and invite all of you out.
Like a Bitcoin
Over there.
or crypto.
Bitcoin climbing.
Crypto
meetup.
climbing.
Yeah.
And then we have a little alliteration there too.
Bitcoin.
Well, no,
Crypto
crypto
climbing.
climbing. Bitcoin. Yeah.
Crypto
It would be
climbing
Bitcoin
meetup.
bouldering.
Yes, Bitcoin bouldering, crypto climbing.
There we go.
Yes.
We already got it.
And our
All right.
director over here rocks, crushes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's killing it.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.